The fork for a giant. One time, in a tiny village nestled between rolling hills, there was a very peculiar legend. The villagers spoke of a giant named Gus who lived atop Mount Grumble. Gus wasn't your typical fearsome giant. He wasn't interested in smashing houses or scaring people. No, Gus was obsessed with one thing, food. The problem was that Gus had hands as big as hay bales and a mouth the size of a barn, but he didn't have a proper fork. Every time he tried to use one, it would snap like a twig. Eating spaghetti? Impossible. Picking up a single meatball? Forget about it. So, Gus did what any reasonable giant would do, he ate with his hands. This resulted in spaghetti flying through the air, meatballs rolling down the mountain, and villagers constantly finding stray noodles in their gardens. Something must be done, declared Mayor Muffin, the smallest and bossiest mayor the village had ever had. We can't keep dodging airborne lasagna. The plan the villagers called an emergency town meeting. Blacksmith Bob suggested making a fork out of metal, but they didn't have enough iron. Farmer Fiona suggested carving one from wood, but every time Gus used wooden forks, they turned into toothpicks. That's when young Timmy, a boy with wild hair and even wilder ideas, raised his hand. Why don't we ask Gus what he wants? Timmy said. The room fell silent. Ask the giant? No one had dared speak to Gus in years. But Timmy, armed with a notebook, a pencil, and a ridiculous amount of curiosity, marched up Mount Grumble to meet the messy eater himself. Meeting Gus when Timmy reached the top, he found Gus sitting on a boulder, trying to eat soup with his hands. It wasn't going well. Hi, Mr. Gus. Timmy called, dodging a flying carrot. Gus stopped mid-slurp, startled. Who's that? Gus rumbled. It's me, Timmy from the village. I came to ask, what kind of fork do you need? Gus scratched his enormous chin. A fork that doesn't break and can handle giant-sized bites. And it needs to be dishwasher safe. Timmy scribbled furiously. Got it. Building the fork, Timmy returned to the village and explained Gus's requirements. The villagers pooled their resources. Blacksmith Bob contributed scraps of iron, Farmer Fiona donated a sturdy oak handle, and Baker Betty threw in some leftover donuts as fuel for the forge. Even the kids pitched in, painting the fork with bright colors to make it extra special. Days turned into weeks, and finally, the giant fork was ready. It was taller than a tree, shinier than a knight's armor, and had prongs so strong they could pierce a mountain-sized stake. To test, the villagers rolled the fork up the mountain using a combination of ropes, donkeys, and a very enthusiastic goat. When Gus saw the fork, his eyes lit up like two giant lanterns. Is this for me? Gus asked, his voice quivering with excitement. Try it out, Timmy said. Gus carefully picked up the fork and speared a massive pile of spaghetti. The noodles didn't slide off, the fork didn't bend, and for the first time in forever, Gus didn't spill a single drop of sauce. He chewed happily, a giant-sized grin spreading across his face. This fork is perfect. Gus boomed. Thank you. A new friendship from that day on, Gus became the village's friend. In return for the fork, he promised to keep his food disasters on the mountain. In fact, he even invited the villagers to weekly giant dinners, where everyone feasted on Gus-sized pizzas, burgers, and the occasional 20-layer cake. As for Timmy, he became a local hero and started designing other giant-sized utensils. Soon, Gus had a matching spoon, knife, and even a giant straw for his smoothies. And if you ever visit the village by Mount Grumble, don't be surprised if you see a giant happily twirling spaghetti with a fork that's larger than your house. The end.